the Soviet spy who lived inside the US government for 22 years. Imagine going to work every morning, badge in, sit at your desk, exchange pleasantries with colleagues, attend classified briefings, handle documents stamped with the words "Top Secret." Now imagine that for 22 years, more than 2 decades, you are not who your badge says you are. You are not loyal to the government that employs you. You are not protecting the country whose flag hangs in the hallway outside your office. You are reporting everything, every name, every operation, every secret, to Moscow. This is not fiction. This is the true story of Robert Hanssen, the most damaging spy in American history, and the FBI never saw it coming. Robert Philip Hanssen was born on April 18, 1944, in Chicago, Illinois. From the outside, he was everything America wanted its intelligence officers to be. He was intelligent, methodical, deeply religious, a devout convert to Opus Dei, a conservative Catholic organization. He was a family man, a father of 6. He wore conservative suits, quoted scripture, and carried himself with quiet authority. He earned a degree in chemistry from Knox College, then an MBA. Then, in 1972, he joined the Chicago Police Department as an internal investigator, learning from the inside how institutions catch corruption. In 1976, he joined the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, one of the most elite and secretive law enforcement agencies on Earth. And it was inside that institution, the very institution charged with hunting foreign spies on American soil, that Robert Hanssen would begin his career as one. He would go on to betray more than 50 human sources. He revealed the identities of Soviet officers who had secretly been working for the United States. At least 3 of those men were executed as a direct result. He handed over thousands of pages of classified documents. He disclosed details of American nuclear war plans. He told the Soviets, and later the Russians, about a top-secret underground tunnel the US had dug beneath the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C. to intercept communications. And he did all of this for 22 years, while drawing a government paycheck, while receiving commendations, while being trusted. Hanssen did not begin spying because he was blackmailed. He was not caught in a honeypot. He was not facing financial ruin, at least not in the beginning. He made a choice, a cold, calculated, deliberate choice. In 1979, just 3 years into his FBI career, Hanssen walked into the offices of a Soviet military intelligence agency, the GRU, in New York City, and offered to sell them secrets. He gave them the names of 3 Soviet officers who had been secretly recruited by American intelligence. Think about what that means. 3 human beings living double lives, risking everything to help the United States, and Hanssen sold them out in his very first meeting. 2 of those men were later arrested by the Soviets. One, a man named Dmitry Polyakov, was executed. Polyakov had been one of the most valuable assets the CIA had ever recruited. He was given the code name Top Hat. He had served the United States faithfully for nearly 2 decades. And with a single act of betrayal, Hanssen ended his life. After that first brush with espionage, Hanssen stopped. He pulled back. Perhaps he felt guilt. Perhaps he feared exposure.
His wife, Bonnie, reportedly discovered what he had done and pleaded with him to confess to a priest, which he did. The priest told him to donate the money he had received to charity. He donated some of it. He did not donate his ambition. He did not donate his grievances. And in 1985, after 6 years of silence, Robert Hanssen returned to the shadows, this time reaching out directly to the KGB. What made Hanssen different from nearly every other spy in American history was not just what he betrayed, it was how he operated. He was a student of espionage. He knew exactly how spies were caught, and so he built a system specifically designed to avoid every known vulnerability. First, he never revealed his true identity to his handlers. Throughout his entire career as a spy, the KGB, and later Russia's SVR, never knew his real name. They knew him only as Ramon Garcia. He communicated through dead drops, hidden locations where packages and cash could be exchanged without two people ever meeting face to face. Second, he never met his handlers in person. Every exchange was conducted at carefully chosen locations in suburban Virginia and the Washington, D.C. area. A park bench, a bridge, a hollow spot in a particular tree. He would leave packages, they would leave money. No human contact, no photographs, no fingerprints. Third, he refused to be photographed. He refused to travel abroad to meet Soviet officials, as so many other spies had done and been caught doing.
He understood that tradecraft, the craft of spying, was about eliminating risk, not just gathering intelligence. Fourth, and perhaps most remarkably, he used his own expertise to cover his tracks. As an FBI counterintelligence officer, Hanssen sometimes had access to the very investigations being conducted against him. On at least one occasion, he searched FBI databases for any mention of the name Ramon Garcia. There was none. He was invisible. He passed along operational details that were breathtaking in their scope. He revealed that the United States had been eavesdropping on Soviet communications through a secret tunnel beneath their Washington embassy. He disclosed the names of KGB officers who had been turned by American intelligence. He passed along documents about American nuclear response strategies. In return, he received cash. Over the course of his spying career, Hanssen received more than $1.4 million from the Soviets and later the Russians. He also received diamonds on several occasions, which were easier to conceal than large amounts of cash. He was meticulous. He was paranoid. He was, by almost every measure, exceptionally good at what he was doing. The question that haunts intelligence analysts, historians, and psychologists to this day is not just how Hanssen got away with it for so long, but why he did it at all. He was not desperate. He was not ideologically committed to communism. He never expressed sympathy for the Soviet system. In fact, colleagues who knew him described him as conservative, nationalistic, almost reactionary in his political views. So what motivated him? Investigators and psychologists who studied Hanssen after his arrest concluded that the answer was layered and dark. At its core, they believe Hanssen was driven by arrogance, a profound and festering belief that he was smarter than everyone around him, and that the FBI had consistently failed to recognize his brilliance.
He had expected to rise quickly through the ranks. He believed his technical skills, his analytical mind, his understanding of Soviet intelligence were unmatched. But his career plateaued. He was passed over for promotions. He was moved laterally rather than upward. He was, by his own private estimation, unappreciated. The spying, some analysts suggest, was his revenge. His way of demonstrating, to himself if no one else, that he was the most powerful man in any room he entered, that he was operating at a level no one else could even perceive. There was also a deeply unsettling personal dimension. Hanssen had, for years, shared intimate details about his wife with an online acquaintance, even encouraging a friend to watch through a window as he and his wife were intimate. He wrote extensively in online forums under assumed identities. He was a man of profound contradictions, publicly devout, privately reckless, outwardly loyal, secretly treasonous. FBI psychologist Dr. David Charney, who spent years interviewing Hanssen in prison, described him as one of the most complex and paradoxical individuals he had ever encountered. A man who genuinely loved his family and genuinely destroyed his country, without ever believing he had done anything truly wrong. Hanssen came close to being caught on multiple occasions, and each time, a combination of his own caution, institutional blind spots, and astonishing luck allowed him to walk free. In the early 1990s, a colleague at the FBI noticed that Hanssen had accessed a classified computer system in a way that seemed irregular. The colleague reported it. An inquiry was opened, and then nothing. The inquiry went nowhere. The culture within the FBI at the time made it nearly unthinkable that one of their own, particularly someone as outwardly pious and patriotic as Hanssen, could be a spy. This was the central institutional failure. The FBI was extraordinarily good at catching Soviet spies who were Soviet citizens. It was catastrophically unprepared to imagine that the spy might be one of their own agents. The very concept seemed almost impossible, and that impossibility protected Hanssen for years. There was another close call when Hanssen himself, while investigating a Soviet defector's claims, realized the defector was describing behavior that sounded uncomfortably familiar. He buried the connection. No one else made it. And perhaps most remarkably, in the mid-1990s, Hanssen actually wrote an internal FBI memo warning about poor cybersecurity practices within the Bureau, practices that, if improved, would have made his own activities harder to conceal. He submitted the memo under his own name. It was praised. He was briefly considered for a commendation. The spy was advising his agency on how to catch spies, and they listened to him.
What finally brought Robert Hanssen down was not superior American detective work. It was not a surveillance operation. It was not a tip from a patriotic citizen. It was a file. In the late 1990s and into the year 2000, the FBI and CIA had been intensifying their search for the source of a series of devastating intelligence leaks. They had initially suspected another agent, a CIA officer named Brian Kelly, who spent years under wrongful suspicion, his career and personal life effectively destroyed. Kelly was innocent, but the investigation of him consumed years. Then, in the year 2000, American intelligence made a breakthrough. They obtained, through a source within Russian intelligence,
reportedly for a payment of more than $7 million, a file. Inside that file was a plastic bag, and on that plastic bag were fingerprints. Those fingerprints belonged to Robert Hanssen. The file also contained a recording of a phone call between the spy and his Russian handlers. Voice analysis confirmed it was Hanssen. The FBI moved carefully. They did not arrest him immediately. Instead, they reassigned him to FBI headquarters, ostensibly as a promotion, giving him an assistant and keeping him busy with administrative work, while quietly building their case and, crucially, keeping him away from any operational intelligence he could continue to pass along. On February 18, 2001, Robert Hanssen drove to a park in Vienna, Virginia, a park he had used for years as a dead drop location. He made his final dead drop, and as he walked back toward his car, FBI agents surrounded him. His first words, according to agents present, were, "Why took you so long?" Robert Hanssen was charged with 15 counts of espionage and conspiracy. He pleaded guilty in July 2001 in exchange for avoiding the death penalty and, crucially, in exchange for agreeing to submit to full debriefings by American intelligence. He was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms in federal prison with no possibility of parole. He would die behind bars. The damage assessment that followed his arrest was devastating. The FBI's own Inspector General described Hanssen's espionage as possibly the worst intelligence disaster in United States history. At least 3 Soviet assets, men who had risked their lives to help America, were executed because of him. Decades of intelligence work was compromised. Nuclear defense strategies had to be reconsidered. The underground tunnel operation, which had cost hundreds of millions of dollars, was rendered useless. Brian Kelly, the innocent CIA officer who had spent years under wrongful suspicion, received a formal apology from the director of the CIA. He eventually returned to government service. His life was never fully the same. Hanssen himself, in prison, reportedly remained largely unrepentant, analytical and precise to the end, still convinced of his own intellectual superiority, still parsing the world through the cold logic of a man who had spent a lifetime counting what things were worth. He died in prison on June 5, 2023, at the age of 79. The story of Robert Hanssen is not simply a spy thriller. It is a study in something much more unsettling: the gap between who we appear to be and who we actually are. The distance between the face we show the world and the choices we make when no one is watching. He sat in the same buildings as some of America's most dedicated public servants. He shook their hands. He prayed in the same churches. He coached his children's activities. And behind all of that, behind the badge and the briefings and the ordinary life, he was dismantling the very systems he had sworn to protect. The intelligence community learned hard lessons from Hanssen's case. Insider threat programs were reformed. Polygraph use was expanded. Counterintelligence culture began to acknowledge, however reluctantly, that the most dangerous spy might not be a foreign national, but a trusted colleague. But perhaps the most enduring lesson is this: institutions tend to protect the image of themselves. The FBI could not imagine one of its own as the enemy. And that failure of imagination, that refusal to look inward, cost lives. Robert Hanssen operated in the open for 22 years because those around him assumed that someone who looked like a patriot must be one. In espionage, as in life, assumptions
are the most expensive thing you can afford. If this story left you unsettled, good. It should. The Cold War may be over, but the vulnerability that Robert Hanssen exploited, our willingness to trust what is familiar, is not a relic of another era. It is a permanent feature of human nature. Subscribe for more stories from the shadows of history.
And if you want to go deeper, the links below will take you further into the world of Cold War espionage, double agents, and the people who changed history from the inside. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and we will see you in the next one.